Well, it's warming up around the country, so violent weekends are ramping up. A suspect in the South Carolina mall shooting that left 14 people wounded was arrested on Sunday, according to multiple news sources. That's the good news. The bad news is that his bond has been set at a ridiculous $25,000, and get this, he can go to work if he wears an ankle bracelet. Seriously. Columbia Police Department tweeted out on Sunday, update. In a court hearing a short time ago, a judge set a $25,000 surety bond for shooting suspect Jawayne Price. He is also on house arrest and ordered to wear an ankle monitor. The judge will allow Price to travel from home to work certain times of the day. Gee whiz, where's David Hogue or Rachel Maddow and the other anti-gun folks screaming at the skies over yet another mass shooting? You know, something tells me Bill Maher won't be doing a special monologue on Friday night explaining how we need the FBI to find these psychopaths before they unload in front of a Foot Locker. Kind of funny how these mass shooters of color don't create any of the emotional idiocy by all the typical pearl clutchers we usually see when the gunman is a skinny, long-haired white boy. CBS News writes, Columbia Police Chief W.H. Skip Holbrook said 22-year-old Jawayne M. Price, who was one of 3 people initially detained by law enforcement as a person of interest, remains in police custody. He's been charged with unlawfully carrying a pistol, the Columbia Police Department said. The shooting occurred at Columbiana Center, and at least 3 suspects were believed to have brandished weapons. Victims range from 15 years old to 73 years old. Quote, "We don't believe this was random," Holbrook said. Quote, "We believe they knew each other and something led to the gunfire." Unquote. No shit. I'm not going to show much of the footage here, but I will leave a link below. But warning, the link leads to a webpage that contains, let's say, a coarse image. A Facebook profile that is still active as of this recording bears his name and lists his hometown as Columbiana, South Carolina, where the shooting took place. In this profile picture, he appears to be giving the camera the middle finger. I'm guessing the account will be inactive by the time you hear this, because obviously he'll probably put on his ankle bracelet, run straight home, and immediately erase all of his social media. The Daily Mail released a tweet including an image of his mugshot. It reads, South Carolina mall shooting suspect 22 will be allowed to return to work, in all caps, with an ankle monitor while out on bail. 14 individual cases of attempted murder, but hey, the guy's got to go to work. Move along. There's nothing to see here. Meanwhile, if you can believe it, less than 24 hours later, another mass shooting occurred in South Carolina. 9 people were reportedly shot, though there are no reports of fatalities. This mass shooting occurred at a restaurant in a rural area approximately 50 miles northwest of Savannah. So, just what the hell is going on here? Well, it must be those damned ghost guns Joe Biden was talking about the other day. And for old Chucky Schumer, it's just another opportunity to push those billion-dollar gun control bills, of course. Economist Malcolm Gladwell argues that the increase in school shootings is because of a lowering threshold of what's acceptable. The National Review's David French summed up Gladwell's theory thusly. Quote, at the risk of oversimplifying a complex argument, essentially he argues that each mass shooting lowers the threshold for the next. He argues we are in the midst of a slow-motion riot of mass shootings, with the Columbine shooting in many ways the key triggering event. Now, that argument has merit and should be considered. We have seen such a rash of violence across the country in the last 2 years that it's almost becoming normalized. We've become numb to the news. However, Gladwell's article was written in 2015 and a lot has changed since then. Nonetheless, what's really behind the current explosion of violence is more easily explained. We are letting out dangerous criminals in ever-increasing numbers, and in almost every awful case I've read about recently, the perp is a recently released or paroled career criminal with a long, violent rap sheet. A few examples. The Waukesha Christmas Parade Massacre. Last week's mass casualty shooting on a Brooklyn subway train. the woman who was shoved to her death beneath an oncoming subway car, the unprovoked fatal beating of a Los Angeles nurse at a bus stop, or the home invasion murder of Los Angeles philanthropist Jacqueline Avant, the senseless, fatal stabbing of a 24-year-old woman working alone in a store in the trendy Hancock Park area of Los Angeles. And the list goes on and on. Now, what are the similarities between every one of these heinous crimes? 1, they were all fairly recent, within the last year or so. 2, in each instance, the perpetrator was found to be on parole, released early from prison or jail, had a lengthy criminal history, and/or had an active arrest warrant out for them at the time. In other words, none of these criminals should have been out on the streets. It's really that simple. Now, to be fair, we don't know much yet about the criminal histories of the shooters in the weekend's mass shootings in South Carolina. But with the judge releasing the suspect on only $25,000 bond and sentencing him to mere house arrest, it's certainly hard to not come to the conclusion that our justice system is absolutely broken at this point. I mean, not only do we still have January 6th protesters, these are law-abiding, tax-paying citizens locked up in a DC dungeon somewhere, but we also have a manufactured outrage mob, a militant wing of the Democrat Party completely silent as these once horrifying mass shootings go on all over the country. At this point, with zero reaction from all the typical Hollywood pearl clutchers, once again, leading me, and I'm sure you, to conclude it's all bullshit, and it's always been all bullshit. Of course, it's no big deal to the left, and more particularly this squad of privileged females of color. Just more dead black boys in the streets of South Carolina, Baltimore, Chi-Town, New York, the list goes on and on. But hey, let's worry about sending more money and weapons to Ukraine, people. Come on, let's get our priorities straight.
So the whole point of America is that American laws are applied evenly and fairly to American citizens. They're not even trying anymore to do that. After January 6th, the Biden administration placed dozens of its political opponents in solitary for months and months and months, non-violent protesters who didn't hurt anyone. Meanwhile, actual violent offenders, like a guy who just shot 9 people in a shopping mall in South Carolina over the weekend, are already out of jail. Watch.
In Colombia, more than a dozen people injured after gunfire erupted Saturday at a shopping mall. Police believe a dispute among at least 3 people led to the violence. They charged 22-year-old Jawayne Price with unlawful possession of a gun. He was released on house arrest after a judge set bond at just $25,000, allowing him to go to work with an ankle monitor.
The judge's name in that case is Crystal Ruckert, by the way. That's her. Buck Sexton is one of the few former CIA officers we trust. Our friend, host of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. He joins us now. Buck, thanks so much for coming on. It does seem like the core promise of equal justice has been corroded.
The Democrat Party has been using prosecutors' offices not just for social engineering, or you could say for replacing criminal justice with social justice, but also as a weapon. I mean, the most prominent recent example of this is January 6th, where you have people, let's remind ourselves, they're held because they're either supposed to be a threat to the public, which I don't think any person actually believes is based in any reality when you're talking about January 6th, or a flight risk, which also seems quite strange considering many of them have already pleaded and they've gotten months. One just actually got off entirely because he was waved into the Capitol. But look at the way the DOJ was weaponized against Donald Trump before that. In fact, I would say Republicans have gotten far too used to this, whether it's Governor Scott Walker up in Wisconsin and the John Doe laws being used to go after him, Chris Christie and Bridgegate. They wanted to lock up Governor McDonnell, former Governor McDonnell, Virginia's wife, for taking gifts, if you all remember that at one point. They wanted to go after Rick Perry when he was the governor of Texas. These are all prosecutions, by the way, that were either in part or in total dramatic overreach, and it always seems to go one way. Where's the equivalent on the other side? That was just off the top of my head. Meanwhile, people who shoot a lot of people get let out on bail because they're not a danger.
25 grand? There's a shooting. 9 people are shot in a shopping mall, and there's only a gun charge and 25 grand and he's out. I mean, how can that be?
We've seen that progressive prosecutors have taken the opinion in city after city at this point that if they're only honestly softer, more gentle on violent crime across the board, let them out sooner from either a sentence, let them out right away with catch and release, bail reform laws, that somehow this will improve the community police relations that we've seen talked about a bit more now in the aftermath of the BLM protests and riots, that hasn't worked at all. They have to admit now across the country that the crime rate has gone up dramatically in pretty much every major city you can think of. Not because of COVID, which is one of the lies they told, not because we were cooking the books and trying to create hysteria on TV, but because they have really stupid policies that are reckless and made things worse for everyone. And Tucker, I think they only care about it, which is obvious to everybody now, because crime is a major issue in city after city, and they're going into a midterm election, and they have people like Gascon and others, by the way, Krasner in Philadelphia, Boudin in San Francisco, who just look like lunatics while good people are suffering. They're all Democrats.
That's exactly right. Nicely put. The great Buck Sexton. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Some of this came by way of redstate.com. If you liked it, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment down below. There's a PayPal link in the description box, so please put $1 in the bucket on the way out the door. I'd like to thank everyone for all your donations. They're much needed and much appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we'll see you next time. Oh, and one more thing real quick. I did a video on Wisconsin and the investigation into the election. Obviously, I'm not going to post that here on YouTube, so if you are a YouTube viewer, go down in the description box, find that Bitchute or that Rumble account, and check it out over there. Pretty good video. Thank you for watching.
Come on, move. Move. Easy, easy.